Welcome to VSOW. Today we're really digging into a compelling and, well, often complicated story. We're looking at the independent film scene of the 1980s and its crucial connection to the long, vital journey of Black representation in Hollywood. We've pulled together a rich stack of sources for this deep dive, including a fascinating essay praising 80s independent film, a detailed historical look at African-American cinema, and also a comprehensive research report on diversity in film and TV from McKinsey. Our mission today is to extract the most important insights from these materials, helping you understand not just what happened, but why it profoundly matters, especially for the narratives and opportunities for Black creatives, both in front of and behind the camera.
Exactly, because what's really fascinating here is how these historical patterns in cinema aren't just isolated events. They directly inform the challenges we see today. This exploration will allow us to connect that historical arc with contemporary issues, revealing the intricate interplay between, well, creative purity, commercial pressures, and the systemic inequities within Hollywood. We'll examine how an era often lauded for its artistic authenticity inadvertently set the stage for a critical examination of diversity, and how its very spirit of independence in some ways mirrored the struggle for authentic representation that, frankly, continues even now.
So to truly understand where we are today, we need to rewind a bit. Let's kick off our deep dive by looking back at the independent cinema scene of the 1980s, an era our first source, #Flashback Friday, in praise of the independent cinema of the 1980s by Matt Warren, really champions for its unique spirit. What made that period so special, especially compared to the, big budget studio blockbusters everyone remembers from that time?
It's easy to think of the 80s and immediately picture those steroidal, big-budget studio blockbusters like Top Gun or Back to the Future, huge films. But what's truly fascinating, as Matt Warren argues, is that the real essence of the decade's cinematic innovation wasn't in those mainstream hits at all. Not really. It was lurking in its independent films. These films are described as much weirder, wilder, and more subversive, and crucially, they existed in what he calls a near-total vacuum. This was before the massive Indiewood boom really took off in the early 1990s.
A vacuum, that sounds isolating, maybe?
Well, yes, but the author posits that this pre-mainstream existence was absolutely crucial. It allowed for an authenticity and purity of intent because these creators were largely unburdened by the kind of commercial pressures and massive box office expectations that would later come to define the independent scene as it grew. It was truly a time when filmmakers could experiment, could fail, and could, innovate without constantly eyeing the bottom line. It was more like pure artistic exploration.
It's fascinating to think about that organic growth, almost like a hidden garden of creativity. But did that isolation also create a certain insular quality? The source draws this interesting parallel to underground music like grunge or gangsta rap. Was it truly a reaction to the mainstream or something more intrinsic? Tell us more about this micro-community of filmmakers and the aesthetic patterns they were forging.
That analogy to underground music is incredibly apt, actually. It gets right to the heart of it. Think about the vibrant, almost electrifying underground music scene of that era. You had obscure innovators and anti-yuppie protest music from bands like Black Flag, Fugazi, Public Enemy.
Right, a real counterculture vibe.
Exactly. And a similar electrifying micro-community existed within independent film. These were filmmakers operating without any clear roadmap to riches or mainstream acclaim, no guarantees at all. They were, in essence, creating work mostly for themselves and a small group of like-minded freaks and weirdos.
So not for the multiplexes.
Definitely not. There wasn't a commercial machine waiting to pick them up. They were driven by pure artistic impulse. What's truly remarkable is that, unbeknownst to them at the time, they were actively laying the groundwork for distinct aesthetic patterns, storytelling approaches, artistic values, things that would later take root and flourish on a much grander scale in the 1990s.
So setting the stage for later indie breakouts.
Precisely. This is when figures like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez would break into the mainstream, with films such as Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs in 1992 suddenly showcasing these previously underground sensibilities to a much wider audience. It really proved just how influential that creative vacuum of the 80s truly was.
That sounds like a fertile ground for unique and unconventional voices. Could you provide some concrete examples? Which independent films and filmmakers from the 1980s does the source specifically praise?
Absolutely. The author really highlights a specific crop of films and filmmakers that embody this era's spirit. We're talking about Alex Cox's sci-fi punk caper Repo Man from 1984. Just totally unique.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Very gritty.
And Brian De Palma's ultra-sleazy, psychosexual Hitchcock pastiche Body Double, also from '84. Both are noted for being set in a very specific kind of grimy 1980s Los Angeles, capturing a unique sense of place and time. Other key works mentioned include Paul Schrader's neo-noir American Gigolo from 1980 with its striking visuals,
Very stylish.
and Merritt Koniewiecka's moody adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's Less Than Zero from 1987, which really captured a darker side of youth culture. And then there's Jim Jarmusch. He truly emerged as an original and important voice during this decade. He actually made 4 films in the '80s. Permanent Vacation in '80, the landmark Stranger Than Paradise in '84,
Classic.
Down by Law in '86, and Mystery Train in '89. His minimalist observational style was just utterly distinct. The latter half of the '80s also saw significant influential work from Gus Van Sant with his 1989 film Drugstore Cowboy.
Another great one.
And David Lynch, of course, whose iconic Blue Velvet from 1986 really presaged that distinct Pacific Northwest weirdness. You know, the kind that would later infuse bands like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, and even beloved TV shows like Northern Exposure and Lynch's own Twin Peaks.
Wow, you can really trace the influence.
Definitely. And it's also worth noting that the film Independent Spirit Awards, which have become such a cornerstone for celebrating independent cinema, they actually began during this period in 1984. That further solidified the growing recognition of this unique film scene.
It's fascinating to consider how these creative currents emerged. The author, who was born in 1982, states his fascination for '80s indie cinema isn't nostalgia. Instead, he says it feels exotic. It's an interesting distinction. What specific elements does he identify as contributing to this allure, making it feel so different for him?
It's a great question because exotic truly captures it. He attributes this unique fascination to a few distinct factors. Firstly, it's about seeing a genuine record of the world as it was, during a time he was technically alive but not yet truly cognizant of it.
Ah, so discovery, not memory.
Exactly. It's not about reliving memories for him, but about pure discovery, peeling back layers of time to reveal an era he only vaguely knew. Secondly, he highlights the exceptional work of cinematographer Robbie Mueller, who shot many of the films we just mentioned. Mueller's naturalistic, color-saturated camera was uniquely suited, in the author's view, to capturing the grit laying beneath the decade's MTV sheen.
Getting beyond the surface gloss.
Right, offering a deeper, less superficial view of the era than what was usually presented. And third, there's simply the sheer cool factor of underground 1980s iconography. This iconography, he notes, was deeply rooted in visions of bohemian bad boy rebels and manic pixie dream girls in the years before these archetypes became overused and, as he puts it, tired and cliched. It's the appeal of encountering something truly original, untainted by later commercialization and repetition, that definitely contributes to that exotic feeling.
That independent spirit sounds like a real breeding ground for unique voices and perspectives. But as we transition, it's crucial to remember that not everyone had the same access to that vacuum of creativity, right?
That's a very important point.
So if we shift our lens now to the history of African American cinema, how does the UF Library's source describe that journey, especially in contrast to the broader indie scene we just discussed? It describes it as a harsh timeline of racism, repression, and struggle contrasted with film scenes of boundless joy, hope, and artistic spirit. Could you elaborate on this fundamental tension?
This fundamental tension is absolutely central, almost foundational, to understanding African American cinema history. The source brings up separate cinema, a powerful term coined by historians John Kish and Edward Mapp. It describes this deeply entrenched systemic segregation within mainstream Hollywood. Black filmmakers and performers were essentially forced to operate within their own isolated sphere, often outside the studio system entirely.
Separate and unequal, essentially.
Tragically, yes. This history for Black filmmakers and performers has been a relentless uphill battle to achieve acceptance and respect. Marked, as the source puts it, as an ugly blot on the pages of film history. The source emphasizes that this struggle is precisely what makes moments of triumph so incredibly poignant. It cites Sidney Poitier's Best Actor Oscar acceptance for Lilies of the Field in 1963 as a profound symbol of this long journey to this moment for countless unsung African-American artists who came before him.
A huge moment.
Absolutely, and the sheer volume of material in the UF's African-American cinema collection, over 300 press books and kits, more than 1,000 photographs, vividly illustrates this complex, often heartbreaking, yet ultimately inspiring journey. A journey of resilience, determination, and incredible artistic expression against overwhelming odds.
Wow, that's a lot of ground to cover. And the journey, according to the source, begins with a really controversial landmark. D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation in 1915. It's almost unbelievable that a single film could have such a mixed, almost contradictory legacy. What exactly was its dual impact?
It truly is one of cinema's most paradoxical films. The source states that The Birth of a Nation is simultaneously respected as an epic milestone for its groundbreaking cinematic innovations. Things like its ambitious scope, pioneering camera techniques, narrative complexity.
Technically brilliant for its time.
Undeniably. Yet it is equally reviled as the blueprint for black film stereotypes that would appear throughout the 20th century. This dual legacy means that while it undeniably contributed significantly to the technical and narrative evolution of film as an art form, its overtly racist content established a pervasive and profoundly negative influence.
So it basically set a terrible precedent for representation.
Exactly. It essentially laid the groundwork for a long, painful period of harmful, demeaning, and stereotypical depictions of black characters in cinema that would persist for decades. Researchers tracing this history consistently observe an extended period of such casting, with films like the infamous Song of the South from 1946 serving as a prime example of its lingering and destructive impact on representation. It's a stark reminder of how powerful and, frankly, problematic the medium can be.
It's incredible to think how long those stereotypes persisted. But despite these struggles, moments of artistic vibrancy did emerge. The source highlights all-Negro musicals and the introduction of serious black actors in the post-war era. Can you provide examples of these positive developments that offer glimpses of hope and talent?
Yes, absolutely. Despite the pervasive racism and stereotypical casting that dominated the era, the UF collection itself dazzles with examples of truly glorious all-Negro musicals. These films offered a vibrant, if sometimes constrained, space for black talent to shine. They featured immense talents in singing, dancing, acting.
Like which films?
Films such as the classic Stormy Weather from 1943, St. Louis Blues from 1958, and Porgy and Bess from 1959. While sometimes operating within the limitations of the era's segregated production, these musicals were vital showcases of black artistry. Furthermore, the post-war era saw a significant, albeit gradual, shift. We saw the introduction of serious black actors to the American moviegoer in more dramatic, nuanced roles.
Moving beyond the musical numbers.
Precisely. The source points to iconic performances like Sidney Poitier in A Raisin in the Sun, Dorothy Dandridge in Bright Road, and Brock Peters in To Kill a Mockingbird. These were roles that began to challenge the previously narrow confines. However, it's really important to note the source's cautious observation here, that while these developments represented significant progress and immense promise—
There's a but.
Yes, the promise was greater than reality for this period. This suggests that systemic barriers still deeply limited the full potential of these groundbreaking talents and the scope of stories that could be told.
That's a crucial point, that the promise was often greater than the reality. And as we move through this history, we can't ignore the blaxploitation era, can we? That period from the late 60s and 70s, that's also in the UF collection. What made those films so distinct, and what was their lasting impact, both positive and negative?
The blaxploitation era, broadly spanning the late 1960s and 70s, is a truly significant and often debated chapter in this history. And it's very well documented within the African American cinema collection. Films from this period, such as Shaft, Superfly, Scream, Blackula Scream, Cleopatra Jones.
Iconic titles.
Absolutely. They were characterized by their bold, often gritty narratives, their urban settings, and crucially, they offered flashy lead roles to black actors. For the first time, really, black characters were often the heroes, the villains, the sexy leads, driving the action rather than just being sidekicks or stereotypes.
A real shift in focus.
A huge shift. While these films certainly pushed boundaries and brought black characters into central, action-oriented roles, the source does note that action and grit often overshadowed character development and plot lines. Some critics argue they perpetuated new stereotypes even as they broke old ones. It's complex.
So a mixed bag critically.
Somewhat. However, the critical, undeniable impact of this output, despite any creative limitations or controversies, cannot be overstated. These films definitively did prove the audience for black film was present and eager. This demonstrated a significant and previously underestimated market for black-led content, signaling a crucial shift in the commercial viability of black cinema that Hollywood simply couldn't ignore anymore. It opened doors, even if imperfectly.
That undeniable proof of an audience paved the way for something new. And that brings us to the new black wave beginning in the 1980s, which the source describes as the culmination of a century of filmmaking and yearning. Who were the key figures in this transformative period, and what was the lasting impact of this new wave on Hollywood and beyond?
The new black wave, emerging powerfully in the 1980s, truly represented a pivotal, almost watershed moment. It's described as the culmination of a century of filmmaking and yearning for greater representation, artistic freedom, authentic storytelling. This transformative period was notably led by directors such as Spike Lee and John Singleton.
Huge names.
Absolutely. They arrived on the scene with fresh, uncompromising visions. Their work moved significantly beyond the confines of previous eras. They tackled complex social and racial issues with depth, nuance, and a distinctly black perspective that hadn't often been seen in mainstream cinema. Films like Spike Lee's seminal Do the Right Thing from 1989
A masterpiece.
and John Singleton's powerful Boys and the Hood from 1991 are highlighted as prime examples. They tackled serious topics that crossed racial lines and appealed to mainstream audiences. These weren't just black films for black audiences, they were critically acclaimed films that resonated broadly.
Reaching everyone.
Exactly. The impact of this wave was profound and far-reaching. As the new century began, the source notes, the black actor would find himself among the major box office stars of the day. End quote. This led to a generation of actors like Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Whoopi Goldberg achieving widespread acclaim, not just for popular roles, but for winning Oscars in serious, high-profile and varied roles, a stark, inspiring contrast to the historical limitations and stereotypical casting that had plagued earlier generations. The ultimate conclusion of this period, according to the source, is that the African-American filmmaker was finally earning the respect that was long overdue. It was a moment of true breakthrough, built on a century of struggle and perseverance.
Against this incredible historical backdrop, and in the independent film scene of the 1980s, Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle from 1987 emerges as such a powerful and biting satirical commentary. Roger Ebert's review famously described its creation as more thrilling than anything on the screen. That's a huge statement. Could you really detail the extraordinary circumstances of its production?
It's a huge statement, but when you hear the story, you understand why. The creation of Hollywood Shuffle is truly one of the most remarkable tales of independent spirit and sheer, unyielding determination in cinema history. Robert Townsend, then a young black actor from Chicago, was deeply, deeply frustrated by the profound dearth of meaningful roles available to him. He found himself constantly confined to offensive stereotypes or broadly written caricatures.
The very things the film satirizes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He faced a harsh industry reality that resonates with so many today. His own agent reportedly told him after his role in A Soldier's Story in 1984 that Hollywood only makes one black movie a year. Can you imagine hearing that?
That's just demoralizing.
Completely. So rather than continue the weary, demeaning round of auditions, Townsend simply decided to take matters into his own hands and make his own film. He famously begged cinematographers for leftover film stock, literally piecing together scraps. He borrowed every dollar he could find from friends and family, and somehow, miraculously, persuaded his entire cast and crew to work for deferred payments, meaning they wouldn't get paid until or unless the film made money.
Incredible faith in the project.
Absolutely. He partially financed the film with money he earned from his small acting gigs, but the legend, the most famous part of the story, is that he maxed out credit cards, $60,000 of debt, to secure the latter half of the financing. This incredible independent effort resulted in a logistical triumph, producing what looked like an expensive-looking movie for less than $100,000. It was a true testament to his resourcefulness, his vision, and his unwavering commitment to telling his story on his terms.
That's just incredible. It makes perfect sense that personal frustration would be the driving force behind the film, and that quote from his agent, Hollywood only makes one black movie a year, is just so jarring. How did that very personal struggle translate into the film's narrative and its unique comedic approach, blending that frustration with such sharp humor?
That quote from his agent really was a powerful catalyst for Townsend. He channeled his profound professional dilemmas directly into the character of Bobby Taylor, an aspiring actor who was also working at a fast food joint, which mirrored Townsend's own struggles to make ends meet while chasing his dreams.
Very meta.
Very. The central conflict of the film arises when Bobby auditions for a truly, utterly derogatory crime film titled Jive Time, Jimmy's Revenge. This opportunity forces Bobby into a profound crisis of conscience. Does he compromise his integrity and perpetuate harmful stereotypes for a chance at a big break? Or does he stand up against the degrading roles and risk everything?
One core dilemma.
Exactly. This inner turmoil, the absurdity of the industry's demands, the constant pressure to conform, it's all then translated into a brilliant series of hilarious fantasy sequences and sketches. These imaginative segments allow the film to directly comment on the challenges Black actors faced, turning a very personal, often painful struggle into biting universal satire. The film itself was also a collaborative effort, co-written with his close friend and fellow comedian Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Right, who also knew the struggle.
Absolutely. Wayans had experienced similarly demeaning casting calls and auditions. Townsend himself noted that their collaboration was filled with laughter and a shared sense of resourceful rebellion. It made the creation of the film a truly joyful, albeit financially challenging, act of artistic defiance.
The idea of those satirical sketches is what makes the film so memorable. Could you elaborate on some of the most notable ones within Hollywood Shuffle that directly addressed these stereotypes in such a pointed way?
Certainly. Two prominent and incredibly memorable examples really stand out for their sharp wit and directness. First, there's the sketch Black Acting School. It's brilliantly presented as a fake advertisement for a white-taught acting course designed to teach aspiring Black actors how to be more Black.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's incredibly clever and mercilessly satirizes the ridiculous, often offensive expectations placed on Black performers. It has absurd course titles like Shuffling 200 and Jive 101. The sheer absurdity highlights the narrow, stereotypical roles often available and the demeaning nature of the casting process.
Just brutal satire.
Absolutely. Second is Sneaking in the Movies, a hilarious parody of the popular film review show At the Movies, which famously featured critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. This segment features spoofs of popular films of the era like Indiana Jones and Dirty Harry, but with overtly racist twists. It exposes the underlying biases that often permeated mainstream cinema and how these films could be interpreted through a different, more critical lens.
Turning the lens back on the blockbuster.
Exactly. Roger Ebert, in his actual review of Hollywood Shuffle, noted that while the film had many good laughs and clearly showcased Townsend's strong screen presence, he felt that some of the stereotypes it attacked haven't been used in Hollywood movies in decades.
Interesting critique.
It is, but it's important to consider that Ebert himself attributed this perceived outdatedness to the film's low-budget production constraints, implying that Townsend might have had to work with available material, and that perhaps his satire was educating viewers on the historical depth of these stereotypes, even if they weren't as prevalent at that exact moment. Regardless, the intent to satirize and challenge was abundantly clear and incredibly effective.
So, given its impactful satire and its DIY origins, what would you say is the enduring legacy of Hollywood Shuffle?
Yeah.
How did it truly pave the way for modern Black satire, as one source suggests, and what is its continued relevance for us today?
The enduring legacy of Hollywood Shuffle is truly significant. It's widely considered to have planted a seed for much of the Black comedic and satirical work that followed. It's seen as a direct predecessor to groundbreaking shows like In Living Color,
Which also involved the Wayans family.
Exactly, including co-writer Keenan Ivory Wayans. Townsend and Wayans are even described as the first soldiers over the hill in terms of courageously making unapologetic satirical comedy that directly confronted industry stereotypes in a way that had rarely been done before. It was a fearless, trailblazing effort.
So it really broke ground.
Immensely. While some of the film's commentary might feel slightly outdated today, particularly because some stereotypical roles are now maybe approached with more nuance by Black actors due to increased creative control, the film provides an important snapshot of 80s Hollywood. It perfectly captures a moment before figures like Spike Lee, Julie Dash, Darnell Martin, John Singleton, and eventually Townsend himself truly ushered in a wave of diverse Black cinema. It's a timestamp of the frustrations that fueled that wave.
A historical marker.
Precisely. Townsend himself points to Donald Glover's Atlanta, particularly the Mr. Chocolate sketch, as the closest modern equivalent to what a Hollywood Shuffle Part 2 might look like. He highlights its brilliant, smart, and satirical nature. And he notes a profound shift since his early days, acknowledging that the industry now has a whole land of creatives, which is a significant change from when, as he put it, it was just me and Spike at one point. This really speaks to its foundational role in fostering a more diverse and creatively vibrant landscape.
That's a powerful and hopeful note to transition on. Because despite all that historical progress and the impactful work of films like Hollywood Shuffle, Recent research from McKinsey reveals that inequity for Black professionals in film and television persists and is deeply entrenched across the film and TV ecosystem. That's a stark contrast. What is the true scale of this problem, particularly its often overlooked economic fallout?
This is a critical and sobering insight from the McKinsey report. And frankly, it's a figure that should grab anyone's attention, regardless of their perspective. The research not only quantifies the moral and social problem, but also clearly lays out the tangible economic fallout of these persistent racial inequities. The report estimates that by simply addressing these issues, the industry could unlock an additional $10 billion in annual revenues.
$10 billion.
$10 billion annually. To put that into perspective, that's approximately 7% more than the industry's 2019 baseline of $148 billion. That is a staggering amount of money, a significant missed opportunity.
Where does that loss come from?
Well, this substantial economic loss, the report details, stems from several interconnected factors. Firstly, there are fewer Black-led stories even being told in the first place, stifling creativity at its source. And when these stories do manage to get greenlit, these projects are consistently underfunded and undervalued across the board.
Even if they perform well.
That's the kicker. What's particularly striking and, frankly, infuriating is that this underinvestment occurs despite often earning higher relative returns than other properties. So it's not just a social injustice, it's a significant, quantifiable economic drain on the entire industry. It's simply bad business, leaving money on the table.
That's astonishing. And the report distinguishes between on-screen and off-screen representation, highlighting significant disparities in creative control. What are the key findings regarding Black professionals in those critical above-the-line roles? That's your writers, directors, and producers, the ones who truly shape the vision and narrative.
The data reveals a stark and deeply troubling disparity in creative control for Black professionals in above-the-line roles. According to the research, less than 6% of the writers, directors, and producers of U.S.-produced films are Black.
Less than 6%. That's incredibly low.
It is, especially when you consider the Black population percentage in the U.S. is around 13.4%. This underrepresentation is even more severe in certain genres, like superhero films, where it's almost non-existent. A critical finding the report identifies is what it calls the multiplier effect.
What does that mean?
It means that unless at least one senior member of a production, like a Black producer or a Black director, is involved, Black talent is largely shut out of those pivotal creative roles. For instance, the data shows that films with a Black producer, which only account for a mere 8% of all U.S.-produced films,
Only 8%.
or a Black director, just 6% of all films, are significantly more likely to have a Black writer involved. In television, the pattern is equally pronounced. Over 4 out of 5 shows with a Black creator also have a Black showrunner, yet only a minuscule 5% of all showrunners across the industry are Black.
So the few Black creators are hiring other Black talent.
Exactly. It illustrates a painful truth. The burden of creating opportunities for other Black professionals disproportionately falls on the shoulders of the very few Black creatives who manage to reach senior positions. It's not a systemic solution, it's a burden.
That concentration of responsibility on so few individuals must be exhausting. And this underrepresentation extends right up to the very top to executive decision-making roles, with the film industry notably less diverse than even some sectors like energy and finance.
The figures here are, frankly, quite telling and highlight a deep-seated issue. 87% of TV executives and a staggering 92% of film executives are white.
92%. Wow.
Yeah. When you compare that to industries often perceived as less diverse, like energy or finance, the film industry's numbers are often worse. This profound lack of Black executives at the highest levels of decision-making has, as the report puts it, troubling knock-on effects that ripple throughout the entire industry. Well, a key implication is how the system essentially perpetuates itself. Former studio executives often secure lucrative production deals as independent producers, frequently affiliated with the very studios they once ran. If those executive ranks are overwhelmingly white, then the inequity prevalent in the studios will inevitably carry over into the pool of producers and the types of projects they get greenlit.
Reinforcing the status quo.
Precisely. The report identifies this as part of dozens of hidden barriers and other pain points that reinforce the racial status quo, effectively creating a self-sustaining, rather insidious cycle of underrepresentation in positions of power and creative control. It's a closed loop that's incredibly hard to break from within.
So it's not just about who's on screen, but who's making the decisions that put people on screen. While on-screen representation has seen some progress,
the report still identifies significant problems. Can you detail the current situation for Black actors, particularly in leading roles, and how the projects they are involved in are funded?
Yes, exactly. While there has been some progress in on-screen representation and Black actors' overall presence in film casts broadly aligns with the U.S. population's Black share of 13.4%, the report concerns that the situation for Black actors remains deeply problematic in crucial areas. A significant issue emerges when we look specifically at leading roles. Black actors play only 11% of leading film roles, falling short of their population representation.
Still a gap there.
A noticeable gap.
Hmm.
Furthermore, they are often funneled to race-related projects, which critically receive lower investment in both production and promotion. This means that even when Black actors secure leading roles, the projects themselves are often financially disadvantaged from the outset. They're given less to work with, less to promote.
And what about streaming? That's huge now.
Right. And the situation in streaming services, despite their explosive growth and often progressive branding, was particularly lagging in 2019, with less than 5% of shows featuring Black leads. Now, a more recent Netflix Commission report did show higher on-screen representation for Black talent, 15.2% for lead or co-lead roles across 2018-19.
Okay, that sounds better.
It does, but crucially, it still confirmed very low percentages for Black professionals in above-the-line roles, only 6.6% for films and 7.9% for scripted series during that same period. This strongly reinforces the multiplier effect we discussed earlier and leads to a difficult but clear conclusion. Black creatives are carrying the weight of Black diversity and inclusion, meaning they disproportionately generate the opportunities for other Black talent in the industry rather than the industry itself creating systemic pathways.
That's a heavy burden to bear. The report outlines really significant barriers to entry for Black talent, which go far beyond just auditions. Could you break down these financial, social, and racial bias challenges that make it so difficult to even get a foot in the door?
The report meticulously details multiple insidious barriers to entry for Black talent, creating a challenging landscape from the very beginning. First, there are significant financial barriers. Breaking into the industry often requires years of working for low or even unpaid wages. Think of the countless internships, assistant roles, passion projects that don't pay.
Which many people just can't afford to do.
Exactly. This is incredibly difficult for many given the persistent racial wealth gap in the United States, where the median Black family has about $150,000 less wealth than the median white family. The industry's reliance on temporary, contract-based, often unpredictable work further exacerbates this, making it less accessible to those without significant personal savings or family money to fall back on for years.
Okay, so finance is one. What about social barriers?
Second, social barriers play a huge, often invisible role. The research highlights that jobs frequently go to insiders' acquaintances or extended networks, which are overwhelmingly white and upper class. Without formal search or recruitment processes, access often boils down to who you know and those who you know people know.
The old boys club.
Pretty much. It effectively excludes many Black college students who aren't concentrated in elite universities that naturally form these established industry networks. And third, there's pervasive racial bias, both overt and subtle. Industry gatekeepers, agencies, unions, guilds often respond more favorably to those who look, act, sound, and write like they do.
Unconscious bias, perhaps.
Often, yes, but sometimes more explicit. In 2015, about 90% of staff at top talent agencies were white, and Black talent share was less than half the U.S. Black population. Black writers reported struggling to find agents even after being staff writers on popular shows, a shocking testament to the bias. And Black agents themselves recounted being passed over for promotion despite outperforming their white peers, highlighting the deeply entrenched nature of this bias within the system itself.
It sounds like even if you manage to push through those initial barriers, the challenges don't end. The report mentions ongoing challenges, even once Black professionals are in the door. Things like getting fewer at-bats, being stereotyped and set apart, undervalued and held back, and being unsupported and passed over. What are some specific examples that illustrate these pain points, including the disheartening concept of a Black tax?
These ongoing challenges are indeed pervasive and can be deeply disheartening. Let's break them down because they speak to systemic issues that persist throughout a Black professional's career. First, getting fewer at-bats means less opportunity and, crucially, less room for error. Emerging Black actors, for instance, receive an average of 6 leading roles in their first 10 years in the industry. That's significantly less than the 9 for their white counterparts.
Fewer chances to succeed or even fail.
Exactly. This disparity leads to incredibly inconsistent income, with Black actors often going 2 or 3 years between lead roles. It makes it incredibly difficult to sustain a stable career, let alone build momentum. The report notes that Black creators and actors need to be able to fail and get another chance like everyone else, but currently that simply isn't the case for them.
Okay, what's next? Stereotyping.
Second, Black talent is frequently stereotyped and set apart in the types of projects they are offered. The analysis shows that films with 2 or more Black off-screen professionals, meaning a critical mass of Black creative input, are twice as likely to be either race-specific, like a historical biopic, or race-adjacent, like a comedy where race is central. This is despite such material only making up about a third of all films overall.
So they get pigeonholed.
Very much so. A creative executive famously articulated this frustration by saying, when studios are looking for Black content, they're looking for Wakanda or poverty with no in-between. This severely limits creative potential and often forces actors into taking stereotypical work just to stay employed and visible.
And undervalued. How does that manifest?
Third, Black professionals are consistently undervalued and held back, leading to significant financial disparities. Race-agnostic films, those where race isn't central to the plot, receive 3 times the average production budget of race-related films. Furthermore, films of any kind with 2 or more Black professionals in off-screen creative roles receive more than 40% less production budget compared to other films.
40% less. That's huge.
It's astounding, especially considering these very films often make 10% more in box office revenues per dollar invested.
So it makes no financial sense.
None at all. Additionally, films with Black leads receive a quarter less budget on average. There's also a widespread misperception that Black-led content won't perform internationally. This leads to these films being distributed in 30% fewer international markets, despite earning nearly the same global box office sales. This points to a clear failure of, let's be frank, often white decision-makers to relate to and properly market Black content, leading to reluctance to finance it fully and distribute it globally.
And finally, this Black tax.
Yes, finally, we have the pervasive issue of being unsupported and passed over, which famously includes the insidious concept of a Black tax. This Black tax is the unfair burden Black talent must shoulder. They often have to fight or even pay out of pocket for basic necessities that white talent takes for granted.
Like what?
Things like appropriate lighting for darker skin tones, and crucially, hair and makeup artists who are skilled with Black hair textures and complexions. One executive recounted a department head repeatedly refusing to hire an appropriate hairstylist for a Black client, with the producer passively suggesting the industry just needs more Black actors so it doesn't happen so often.
Passing the buck.
Completely. The executive's retort was sharp and to the point. What if you're the problem? This highlights how Black talent often needs to advocate for equity on their own, a truly unfair burden. Black women, in particular, report facing heightened challenges, including significant isolation and having to work exponentially harder for less recognition. Sponsorship, which is crucial for career advancement, is also severely lacking for Black professionals.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, and this culminates in Black talent often being the last in and the first out, disproportionately vulnerable to market shocks. For example, the share of films with Black talent significantly dropped after studios cut their output of films starting in 2008-09. Why? Due to the mistaken and costly belief that it's harder to sell Black internationally, it illustrates a persistent vulnerability.
That Black tax concept really brings home how deeply entrenched and unfair these systemic issues are. So with all these deeply rooted challenges, the McKinsey report concludes with a set of 4 key measures to increase diversity and representation. Given the complexity of the industry's interconnected value chain, what are these proposed solutions for achieving genuine, sustainable change that can truly break these cycles?
The report is very clear. Achieving genuine sustainable change requires sweeping industry-wide changes. And crucially, it emphasizes that these efforts should ideally be spearheaded by an independent third-party organization. It highlights that no single studio or agency can achieve equity alone due to the industry's highly interconnected nature.
Okay, so what's the first solution?
The first proposed solution is to ensure diverse representation, especially among off-screen talent and executives. This isn't just about actors. It involves setting and publicly announcing specific targets for Black and non-white representation across all levels, including boardrooms. Potentially mirroring the U.S. population's demographics, 13.4% Black, 40% non-white. It also calls for expanding recruiting efforts beyond traditional networks to include state schools and historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs.
Widening the talent pool.
Exactly. Recognizing that nearly 60% of the black American labor force is concentrated in the South. Boosting mentorship and sponsorship, paying interns a living wage, offering trade school programs for below-the-line jobs, the craftspeople, technicians are all critical. Ultimately, industry decision-makers and gatekeepers must commit to changing their own beliefs and behaviors, as increasing black talent in key off-screen roles will have that crucial multiplier effect. This also extends to vital parts of the ecosystem like critics, awards bodies, film festivals, noting, for example, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association's historical lack of black members.
Right, the whole ecosystem needs attention. What's number 2?
Secondly, the report advocates for increased transparency and accountability. This means regularly tracking and publicly disseminating progress on racial equity through intersectional reporting, including data on race, ethnicity, gender, and sharing it with an external organization. Adopting formal performance evaluations and promotion processes to limit systemic bias, strengthening HR's authority even on location, clearly defining and celebrating inclusive behavior, and tying executive bonuses directly to diversity targets are all crucial steps.
Hitting them where it hurts the wallet.
Essentially, yes, it's about putting teeth into commitments, ensuring leaders are truly held accountable for tangible, measurable progress.
Makes sense. And the third point?
Third, the industry must seek and financially support a wide range of black stories. With demand for diverse content clearly on the rise, industry leaders should dedicate significant upfront funding. This could involve committing 13.4% of annual budgets to projects featuring black leading actors, producers, writers, and directors again, to mirror the black share of the U.S. population. It also means funding initiatives across the entire pipeline, from development and production to marketing and international distribution.
Challenging those myths about international appeal.
Absolutely. Expanding the international distribution of films with black talent is essential, actively challenging that misperception that such content won't perform well globally.
Okay, and the final recommendation.
Finally, and this is a particularly impactful suggestion, the report calls for the creation of an independent organization to promote diversity. This directly addresses the concept of the black tax by ensuring that black industry professionals are not solely expected to reform the industry on their own. It shouldn't be their burden alone.
A dedicated body.
Exactly. A well-funded, arm's-length group with strong backing from industry leaders would strengthen individual efforts by developing and scaling best practices, collecting and disseminating intersectional data, and reporting on progress across the industry. This is especially critical given the significant risks black professionals often face when speaking up about inequities. This independent organization would provide a crucial, centralized, and unbiased force for genuine, sustainable change across the entire ecosystem, ensuring progress is tracked and maintained, not just talked about.
Today, we've taken a really deep dive into the unique cinematic landscape of the 1980s and critically examined the long, complex journey of black representation in Hollywood. We've seen how films like Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle provided such biting satire against a backdrop of systemic challenges, and how contemporary research reveals the ongoing financial and social costs of these inequities. After unpacking all of this, what stands out to you as the most profound implication of this entire discussion for our understanding of film and broader cultural narratives?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's just so clear that the film and TV industry doesn't just entertain. It fundamentally shapes cultural beliefs and attitudes about race, both domestically and internationally. The profound implication, I think, is that the industry's historical and ongoing inequities are not merely an abstract social issue, but a tangible economic detriment, a massive one. The fact that the industry is leaving at least $10 billion in revenue on the table each year by stifling black talent and underfunding black-led stories, it just underscores that achieving racial equity is not merely a moral imperative.
It's an economic one, too.
It's an undeniable economic one for the entire ecosystem. Ultimately, improving racial equity in film and TV will be a boon for all audiences. It allows for a richer, more authentic tapestry of human experience and creative expression to truly reshape ideas on race in America and beyond, moving us towards a more equitable and representative narrative landscape for everyone.
That's a powerful thought to consider, that the stories we choose to tell, and importantly, who gets to tell them, can actively reshape our societal understanding of race. It truly illustrates the profound impact of this industry, way beyond mere entertainment. We hope this deep dive into the sources has provided you with valuable insights and perhaps prompted some new questions for your own reflection. If you found this deep dive insightful, Please subscribe, like, and comment to share your thoughts and help us continue these important conversations. Thank you for listening to VSOW.